You know those other people? Like other people with their different ideas, with the stupid things they do and the stupid things they say and the stupid things that they post on the internet. Have you ever heard a pastor say stupid so much? Welcome everybody, my name's Pete. I'm one of the lead pastors here at Creekside, and you are joining us for week 2 of our series called Before We Lose Our Minds, which if you're anything like me, then you found that this COVID season that we're in, which is kind of what I'm calling it, it's hard to figure out, like, what do we call this? Like the time when we were all under this house arrest and everything shut down. I don't know. It's this COVID season. I don't know if you're anything like me, but it has like amplified anything that was going on previously. So like if you were overwhelmed before this pandemic came, you are like ultra overwhelmed now. If you were feeling anxious before, you are now like just pushed to the nth degree. If you felt like a lack of purpose and you felt a little bit lost, now you feel really lost because you don't know which way to go and what's coming next. If you felt like technology was like just too much technology, well now everything is technology because we can't be with each other, and so everything is a screen. If you felt like tensions, political and racial, were like heightening, it feels like now they're exploding even more. This whole COVID thing has amplified things so much that if you're anything like me, you felt like, I feel like I'm getting to the point, or I'm aiming in the direction where it's like I'm losing my mind. Or if I keep going in this direction, I think I'm going to lose my mind. And so this series is about some things that you can do before we collectively all lose our minds. And so last week, we talked about what do you do when you're just feeling like overwhelmed? What do you do when just like the lack of rhythms and all of the change that has come just leaves you feeling like, I don't even know, like, where's my foundation? Where can I feel rooted now? And last week I talked about framing like a statement or a prayer that begins with this: I am a beloved child of God, and I live in his unshakable kingdom. And to begin each day by just saying that over yourself and find your rooting, find your foundation in the kingdom of God, and then maybe add to it some of the roles or some of the specific things that you know God has called you to do in this season. But today, what I want to talk about is a different problem, a different thing that can lead us to this whole feeling like we are losing our minds. And that problem is this: other people. You know those other people? Like other people with their different ideas, with the stupid things they do and the stupid things they say and the stupid things that they post on the internet. Have you ever heard a pastor say stupid so much? Sorry. Other people. We used to live in like a time where before technology, the amount of other people that you would engage with on a daily basis was kind of limited, right? Like there was the people that you lived with. Then you'd go outside of your house and maybe you'd bump into a neighbor or two. Then you'd go to work and you'd work with those people, but they were the same people and you knew them. Then you'd come home and then that was kind of like your day. I mean, how many people is that? Like 10 people. 10 different ideas, different backgrounds, and you got to know these people, and there was a certain depth to how you engaged with them. But now, because everything's on the internet, and because we have things called social media, we're with like this gesture, with just doing this, I can see 20 different people. You know, you spin the wheel of Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, and you can get 20 different people from all over the world that all have different ideas, that are all doing different things, that all say things differently, and that are all posting all kinds of crazy content. And so what I want to talk about today is that how these other people and all their different ideas, actions, words, and posts can lead us to lose our minds. And so here's the question: what goes on inside of you when you are confronted by something that you dislike or disagree with? Because 100 years ago, I don't know if there's anybody watching that was here 100 years ago, but 100 years ago, this wouldn't happen all the time. Like being confronted with a drastically different worldview, or someone who believed something drastically different than you. That wouldn't happen all the time. And when it did happen, it was someone that you knew and you had a relationship with and maybe entered into like a deeper dialogue with. But now, with just the one flick, you could come across 20. You could spend a minute and you could find 20 different things about things that you dislike or disagree with. And what happens inside of you? Like what happens inside of you when you're reading on Facebook and you read something that you disagree with from those other people? Other people that like think different things than you. What happens within you when you read like something that's going to be decided by a government and you disagree with it? What begins to happen within you? I find that within me, sometimes there's like an emotional response begins to well up in me. Sometimes it's almost like I have to like keep it down because I'm like, I got to do something. Like I'm not the type to write something in a post, but like if I was, I would like start typing. Like I gotta respond to this in some way. And because we get so many of these things bombarding us that we maybe dislike or disagree with or haven't seen before or cause us to be confused or become afraid, because that's happening all the time, I think that it can actually set us on this trajectory of feeling like, am I losing my mind? Like everywhere I look, I feel like there's conflict and different ideas bombarding me, and I don't know what to do with that. And so I want to talk about 4 switches in your mindset. 4 specific things that 4 specific ways that I think that we kind of naturally respond to these things, and 4 ways to like take those specific things and shift them to a different mindset. And so here's the first one, because here's one of the first ways that I think we react, and be honest, this is you sometimes, but sometimes outrage. Sentences that begin with, I can't believe people think that. I can't believe people are doing that. I can't believe the government has decided to do this. I can't believe those school teachers. I didn't say what I think about school. I can't believe what the unions are. I can't believe that we're even sending the kids back to school. I can't believe we didn't send the kids back to school sooner. I can't believe that we don't have a vaccine yet. I can't believe that we have to wear masks. I can't believe that we weren't wearing masks all the time. What do you do when you see things that you dislike or disagree with? I think sometimes there's just like an outrage. Like, I cannot believe that someone would think this. I can't believe that someone would believe this, that someone actually believes that this is true. How many times is like just a sense of outrage? And if you're not a person like a keyboard warrior to like type it in to the search engine, you may think like, I'm pretty good. I don't actually type something in. But you probably bring that to another conversation. So you bring like you have the experience, and then in your next conversation you bring it. So it's kind of like that's your way of dealing with your outrage. But here's the shift that I want us to make is from outrage to curiosity. What if when the next time that you see something that you dislike or disagree with, instead of letting outrage take over and just a sense of like, I can't believe it. The world is on its way to hell in a handbasket. I can't believe it. Just shifting and saying, you know what, I don't want to be outraged. I want to be curious. I want to be a person who's actually, I have never thought about that before. I've never thought about it that way. I wonder why. Instead of a how dare they kind of mentality, you can shift to I wonder why. I wonder why they think that. I wonder how they got to that place. And I get this shift in mindset from a book called the Book of Proverbs. And the Book of Proverbs is a collection of wisdom sayings. And if you read through it, after you get through the first couple chapters, it's just like one tweet after another of wisdom. And so I want to pull 2 out of chapter 18 that I get this idea from moving from outrage to curiosity. And here they are. Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. You know what? You want to be foolish? I don't think you want to be foolish. You don't want to be foolish. But hey, if you want to be foolish, here's how you do it. Just don't seek understanding. I don't want to understand other people. I just want to give out my own opinions, which are outrage. I can't believe it. It wasn't like this before when I was a kid. Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions. When you shift from outrage to curiosity, you're saying, I don't want to be foolish. I actually want to be wise. And what I'm seeking is to understand this other person. I want to understand, where did that come from? Where did that idea that I've never heard before or that I disagree with, where did it come from? Who are you? I want to seek to understand, because I don't want to be a foolish person. I want to be a wise person. And then here's another proverb. To answer before listening, that is folly and shame. You want to respond with outrage right away before you even listen. Like you just saw like a headline of something or like one line, and that's going to set you off. Instead, be a person, no, I actually want to listen. And the way that I'm going to listen is by asking questions. I want to ask questions. I want to just be so interested in this other person. And when you begin with this, when you shift from outrage to curiosity, the goal becomes understanding from that other proverb. The goal, what I'm trying to do is I want to understand you, because from the place of understanding, well, now all kinds of possibilities open up. Maybe I actually agree with you. Or maybe there's actually a place of common ground. Or maybe from a place of understanding, I can now find a way to bring my perspective to you in a way that you could hear it, that you wouldn't have heard if all I did was bring my outrage. So shift in mindset number one, from outrage to curiosity. Number two is in this scenario. The second shift is this. What do you do when someone's actions offend you? When something that somebody did, you're just like, I can't believe that they did that. Think about it in terms of like world leaders, because they're often the ones that we do this with, or like celebrity culture. The people that we look at and we see their lives and we go, I can't believe they did that. That person's a stupid person. That person, it seems like they're an evil person. That person is so immoral. Can you think of examples of like when we do that in the culture? I don't want to put people's names out there, but we do this, right? So this reaction is called this. When we react with just like, what an evil person. We label them something. And I want to look at a shift in mindset that Jesus teaches us in the Sermon on the Mount. In the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 7, so Jesus is like in the middle of this great sermon that he gave. This is like Jesus, his Sermon on the Mount is like his greatest hits. And so he probably gave this sermon a lot of places that he went, but we have it collected for us in the book of Matthew. And in chapter 7, he begins to talk about judging people, which is what a statement like this is when we say of people, what an evil person, what an immoral person, when we're labeling somebody. And Jesus wants to teach us, don't do this. And this is how he teaches us. He says this, do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way that you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Now this is a very important line right here. Do not judge. Because this gets thrown in our faces all the time. Jesus said, don't judge. You shouldn't judge. Don't judge me on anything. And it can kind of leave us feeling a little bit crippled sometimes. Sometimes it makes us feel like, aren't we allowed to like name when something's wrong? Like if we see something, we're like, that's wrong. That's unjust. Can't we make a judgment that that's a bad thing and then point it out and go, that's bad. We're going to call that bad. Well, what Jesus means here, he's using a Greek word, judged, that's the word krino. And krino can be used different ways in the Greek. Sometimes it talks about like making a law decision. Sometimes it means about like having decisions placed before you and just making a decision. And I don't think that's what Jesus means here. He's not saying, do not make decisions. He's not saying, do not have laws that you try to keep and abide by. But there's a third way that krino gets used. And it has to do with judging someone's heart. Judging someone's intention. Judging basically the essence of someone. Judging someone's actions and saying, because I saw you do this, I know what's actually in your heart. That's what Jesus means here. He says, do not judge what's in people's heart. Do not think that you can tell by their actions what their actual intention is. And then he goes on and he begins to like unpack this a little bit further because he's saying, don't do this, but then he tells us a way that we actually can judge other things, like begin to point out where people are maybe making a misstep and we want to help correct them. And then he gives this famous parable that maybe you've heard before. He says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Now, many people point to this and they're like, this is like one of the few times that Jesus was being funny. Because this is Jesus, he's creating like a word picture here of a dude with like a giant plank coming out of his eye. And this guy, he can barely see and he's got this giant thing coming out of his eye. And he's going around pointing at other people like, you got a tiny speck in your eye, there's something wrong with you. And meanwhile, he's got like this giant like Pinocchio board sticking out of his face. So it's a funny image that we get. But he's saying like, why are you looking at the speck when you got a plank sticking out of your own eye? And again, culturally, I've had this thrown in my face before where people know like this, or they can kind of get the gist of this idea, and they throw it at you and they go, yeah, you got a board sticking out of your eye. Don't be poking at the speck in my eye. But Jesus doesn't end the teaching here. He says, be aware that this is the scenario. Like we all have like a board sticking out of our eye. And so this is what you should do. How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So he doesn't say, hey, because you have a board in your eye, therefore don't make any judgments or try to help other people or point out specks in people's eyes. He says, no, you can do that, but first get the plank out of your own eye. So it's like he's saying, so don't judge people's hearts. But if you see someone's actions, like if you can see a speck in somebody's eye and you want to help that person, first you gotta deal with all your own baggage and get the board out of your eye, and then you'll be like equipped and prepared to go and help your brother. And the reason why I think Jesus frames it like this is because the process by which you remove the plank out of your eye will transform you. When you have to go through the process of recognizing, before you say, there's something wrong with this person over here, before you can do that, you have to go through your own personal process of saying, you know what, actually, there's something wrong with me. I see darkness in the world, but there's darkness deep within me. And okay, I'm gonna get rid of that. And then you realize, I actually can't get rid of that on my own. And so what you do is you fall into the arms of the grace of God. And by his mercy and by his grace, he removes the plank from your eye. And then maybe you go on in life and then you realize like you fall back into that trap and you get the board back in your eye, because that happens to us all the time, right? God heals us from something, God gets us out of a mess, and we just jump right back into the mess again. And it's like he takes the board out of our eye and we go, put it back in there. I liked it when it was in there. And when you go through that process of having to constantly fall back into the arms of grace over and over and over, I think what Jesus is saying, once you've done that, once you've gone through that journey, now you're a person who is ready to point out the speck in your brother's eye. Because you won't be coming from a place of, you evil person. Oh, I can't believe I'm so much better than you. You'll be coming from a place of, hey man, we are on the same plane. Like, I've had the speck in my eye. You wouldn't believe what I had in my eye. You wouldn't believe how long it was in my eye for. And from this place of like mutual respect and grace, let me just tell you, I see something in your life that I think is not helping you. And let me help you try to get rid of it. I feel like I got to point it out. So instead of the reaction when you see something that you dislike or disagree with being, what an evil person. I can't believe they did that. I wonder if we can make this shift. If we shift from pride to humility. Well, I think that's what Jesus wants us to do, is to shift from I'm so much better than everyone else. I can't believe how everyone else is operating. My goodness, if only everyone was like me. That Jesus wants us to shift from, no. We don't want everyone to be like you. To shift from a place to a place of humility. What would that be like if we had a whole bunch of humble people out in the world saying like, let me tell you my story, and then let me show you something that I think might help you in your life if you would notice this thing. So this is the second shift, from pride to humility. And the third shift is a shift from this reaction. I'm going to destroy you. Which maybe sounds a little bit harsh. That might sound like, where does this language come from? But go on YouTube, and if you're like a normal YouTube user, then you already know this kind of language. But like on a sports show or on a lot of like reaction videos nowadays, the title in the reaction will be so-and-so destroys this argument, or so-and-so destroys this, or Shannon Sharp destroys Skip Bayless, like on the sports show. Like that's like the popular phrasing now, is to destroy someone. That when you know that they are wrong, when you're like, I am so right and they are so wrong, I'm gonna make a video on YouTube and it's gonna be about how I destroy their argument, how I put them to shame. It's gonna be a very popular way to respond when we see things that we dislike or disagree with. Oh, you think that? Oh man, you are so wrong. Let me get all my Bible verses lined up and I'm going to destroy you. But is that what Jesus would have been like? There's a word that we've lost, and I think it's because it's not a sexy word. But there's a word that describes what we call the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And one of those words we use, I think, the least, and it's the word gentleness. And so gentleness is one of the things that should be pouring out of us as we are people who are filled with the Spirit of Jesus. So we are people, as followers of Jesus, we want to be like him. The way that we are to be like him is to be filled with the power and spirit that he had. And once we are filled with that spirit, certain things should pour out of us. And Paul teaches one of the things that should pour out of us is gentleness. How many people even know what the heck that means, to be gentle? I don't know, like if I found a baby bird in the tree outside my house, like I'd be really gentle with it. Like when I'm helping a friend move and I see a box and it says fragile, be really gentle with that. But I don't really know, how does that apply to me and other people? Well, here's a really simple definition that I think blows it wide open. Gentleness is power under control. Gentleness is power under control. To be gentle is to realize I actually have a ton of power. my words have a ton of power. My words can build up or my words can tear down. My words have a ton of power. And so what I need to do is I need to figure out how can I place them under control? How can I harness them? Like how we harness a horse. Like a horse, like a wild stallion is power out of control. And yet if we train that horse, it can become a horse that is under control. How can I train my words so that they would be directed in such a way that they would help this situation? That they would build somebody up rather than tear them down. I don't want to destroy people. I want to actually restore them. In the book of Galatians chapter 6, right at the beginning of chapter 6, Paul says this. He says, if any of you is caught in sin, so like if somebody in the community is found to be like, man, dude, you're walking in some sin, like you fell in a big pit. If anybody's caught in that sort of thing, he says, restore them gently. Restore them gently. He's basically saying, you guys have the power to restore that person. Just make sure that you put that power under control so that it leads to restoring them, not destroying them. Because when someone in the community gets caught in sin, it's a really fragile time where that person, if it's handled wrong, they could destroy them. They could end up leaving the church because they're like, those people that all they did was like pour on the shame and the guilt and like, I couldn't handle it anymore. I had to get out of there. Paul's like, if any of you is caught in sin, what you need to do is realize you guys have immense power. And if you place it under control, you can actually use it to restore this person. So when you meet somebody, or when you see something online through one of those flicks and you're like, I disagree with this person is so wrong. Here's the shift. Shift from destroy to restore. I don't want to destroy this person. That's not what Jesus would be like. That's not what God is like. That's not what God is like with us when he sees how wrong we are. Oh, I'm going to destroy those humans. No, he's like, let me figure out a way through my power to restore them. Here's the third shift, from destroy to restore. And then the last one is to shift from me and my freedom. And this one I think is particularly important for us inside the church. For those of us who call themselves the community of Jesus, the community of Christ, the church. Because we're in this moment right now, well, let me just begin actually historically, where Christians have always disagreed on a multitude of issues. There's always been a core of things that we believe about Jesus in particular and his resurrection and the character of God. But then there's always been this periphery of other things where we find reasons to disagree. And that disagreement causes all kinds of schisms and conflict and churches separating. And so that's been kind of historically. And now in this COVID season, everything has been like heightened, and there's new things for us to fight about. There's new things for us to fight about, like, should churches gather or not? Should we all be wearing masks or not? When a vaccine comes, should we get the vaccine or not? And it kind of all comes down to, well, is it about you and your freedom to do whatever you want? Or is there like something higher that we could be called to? Paul deals with a similar problem in the book of Romans. And he talks about it in Romans chapter 14. And he's dealing with this issue. Imagine this group of believers, like a large group of believers, and just imagine for argument's sake that half of them believe that they can eat whatever they want. And the other half of them believe that there are certain foods that are unclean. And so there's like a debate among them. And so half of them imagine, they believe, hey, listen, from the beginning of our Jewish heritage, because this half, let's say, were Jews and then they converted into Christianity, they believe like for like 1,000 years of our Jewish heritage, we believe that there were certain foods that are unclean, and we believe that they're still unclean. And then the other half is like, no, because of Jesus and the new covenant, like we're just free. We are free to eat whatever food we want. And so he's dealing with this problem. And I want to pull out a couple verses from chapter 14, and you're going to look at this more deeply in your life group this week. So I'm just going to go through and pull out a couple verses. But this is what Paul instructs the believers having this issue to do and how they should think about it. He says this: accept the one whose faith is weak, without quarreling over disputable matters. So he's saying, some of you, your faith is really strong, and you recognize the freedom that you have in Christ. But others of you are actually just kind of weak, and you're like baby Christians, and your faith is kind of weak, and so you think that like there is food that is unclean. And he's saying, you know what? Don't quarrel over these disputable matters. Now, this is really important, disputable matters. There are matters that would be worth having really important discussions over because they're not disputable matters. But then there's other things that are disputable matters. And he's like, don't get involved in these disputable matters. And then he goes on and later in the passage and says this: if your brother or sister is distressed because of what you eat, you are no longer acting in love. Do not by your eating destroy someone for whom Christ died. You see what he's doing here? He's saying, you that are free in Christ and know that you can eat whatever you want, if you do that, knowing that it is harming the conscience of your brothers and sisters, then you are not acting in love, and you are actually destroying someone for whom Christ died for. Oh, that's pretty heavy. Paul goes on and he says this: let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and to mutual edification. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food. Do not destroy the work of God. What's the work of God? The work of God is the building up of his church, the building up of his community that is the visible expression of who he is to the world. How is the world going to know what God is like? How is the world going to meet God? Through us, through Christ in us, Christ in his church. And when we fight over these things that don't matter, for Paul it was food, he's like, you are destroying the work of God for the sake of food? Like, this side wants to have a steak and some cheese, and this side's like, oh, that I don't know if we can do that. And you guys are willing to like go to war over that and destroy the church over that? And I haven't thought about this deeply enough, but let me just suggest this to you, that we could fill in the blank here with lots of other things. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of wearing a mask. Do not destroy this work of God for the sake of, hey, right now we're just going to have watch parties and, we want to get back to this room, but like right now we don't think that that's the wisest thing to do. So do not destroy the church for the sake of fill in the blank. Again, we're talking about disputable matters. We're not talking about like core doctrine. But isn't that a powerful thing to think of? So here's the shift. From me to we. From me and my freedom and what I believe to you know what? Some things are gray and fuzzy and ambiguous and hard decisions to make. And so instead of me being all about me and what I think is right, there's certain places where I can defer to the community and say, what's actually the best thing for us and for the work of God in this moment? So there's the four shifts to keep us from losing our minds, to shift from outrage to curiosity, from pride to humility, from destroy to restore, and from me to we. And I hope that if we can do these things, I hope that if you can kind of place these, maybe write these down somewhere and place them as like a mental check in your head. When you feel that like that emotion starting to rise, when you feel like you're starting to get upset, just be like, okay, wait, what's happening to me? Am I experiencing outrage? Am I experiencing pride? Am I experiencing this need to destroy someone? Or am I experiencing like a sense of selfishness that I would be able to check those things and shift over to a different mindset? And hopefully if we can do these things, then we will keep from losing our minds. Let me pray for you. And I'm going to pray now. And I often pray at the end of my messages in this way. And it's a prayer for the Holy Spirit's power to help us do whatever it is I just said. Because there's all this like, we should do all these things. But we are helpless to do any of these things. We're helpless to make any of these shifts and actually live them out without the power of the Spirit within us. And so that's how I'm going to pray right now. I trust that you'll pray with me. Holy Spirit, we want to be a good witness to who Jesus is to the world. We want the world to know us by our love. And yet we can't be people who are losing our minds on the internet, or are losing our minds with everybody who disagrees or everybody that we dislike what they think. And so God, by the power of your Spirit within us, would you help us to make these shifts? Would you help us to become people who are gentle, who are humble, who are curious, and who care about the unity of your body, the church? Jesus, we trust that by your Spirit you will empower us to do all of these things. And we ask these things in your name. Amen.